right, there we go. Yeah. Sync up, you gonna get on? Oh, there it goes. Okay, cool. I was like, what's going on? Why isn't this going on? All right, guys, I'm back for a study group time. So we are study group. So we are doing a New Earth with Eckhart Tolle, right? That's right, correct? Yeah, Wednesday is a New Earth because the secret is on Friday, right? Make sure I'm in the right day. I got the right book, right? No, today is the secret, right? Is this today's the secret? Because I don't remember. I'm going to have to go online and look because I don't remember what I'm doing today. Hold on, guys. Let me make sure I got the right freaking book. So please hold to make sure I'm where I need to be because I don't remember. This is the struggles of OCD-ness. Yes, right book. Yeah, so we're in the right book. So hey guys. So it is a Eckhart Tolle. Okay, got it. Yeah, I was like, what am I doing today? Yeah, and it's funny because I've got the graphics opposite, but yes, this is correct. Okay, guys, so we are doing our study group time. And for those of you who don't know what's going on, readings are done. So if you're tuning in for a reading or are wanting to tune in for a person to get a chance to ask me a personal question or a reading that was in the last hour, this is now study group. So we're only doing study group material, study group conversations, focusing on the book A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. So that's what we are about. So I read from the book. I read passages and then I stop. I give commentary depending on if I feel like I need to stop and comment on something. But also feel free to ask questions regarding the material or spiritually minded questions, topical questions that are spiritually based. No personal questions, no personal readings. So that was so if there are any personal questions or personal readings, I'm just gonna skip that. But going back to this, I will answer questions regarding the material itself, the study group, or just questions of a spiritual nature, okay? Jonah's like, I read 10% Happier, and he referenced the author. It actually started to change of Dan Harris's life. Yeah, I don't know who Dan Harris is, because I don't stay up to date with whoever. So to anyone who was new into the scene or coming up or was getting attention after the 2000s. But I know a lot of people have been affected by this, and I can totally see that just because when you start to shift the perspective you have of life and of your role in life or your place in the world, it can completely shift the trajectory of the way you're going to live your life going forward. That's why having such a unique and profound perspective is important because he was a famous news anchor. I got it. Okay. Oh, Dan Harris. Yes, Dan Harris. Now I know. I remember. Yeah, I was like, well, I don't remember who Dan Harris. Well, yeah, Dan Harris is older than me. Duh. Yeah, got it. Now I know who you're talking about. When I read this, I remember reading it in a Cafe Agora in Houston, and I would go every week and spend a few hours at the cafe, and I would just read. So I loved this book, and I still love this book. So, all right, so let's get started here. So the chapter we're on chapter 2, and chapter 2 is Ego, the Current State of Humanity. And so that's what the chapter is about. So I'm going to start here and just kind of work through it, and let me stop and discuss some aspects of it, etc. Words. No matter whether they are vocalized and made into sounds or remain unspoken as thoughts, can cast an almost hypnotic spell upon you. You easily lose yourself in them, become hypnotized into implicitly believing that when you have attached a word to something, you know what it is. The fact is, you don't know what it is. You have only covered up the mystery with a label. Everything, a bird, a tree, even a simple stone, and certainly a human being, is ultimately unknowable. This is because it has fathomable depth. All we can perceive, experience, think about is the surface layer of reality, less than the tip of an iceberg. Underneath the surface appearance, everything is not only connected with everything else, but also with the source of all life out of which it came. Even a stone, and more easily a flower or a bird, could show you the way back to God, to the source, to yourself. When you look at it or hold it and let it be without imposing a word or mental label on it, a sense of awe or wonder arises within you. Its essence silently communicates itself to you and reflects your own essence back to you. This is what great artists sense and succeed in conveying in their art. Van Gogh didn't say, "That's just an old chair." He looked and looked and looked. He sensed the beingness of the chair. Then he sat in front of the canvas and took up the brush. The chair itself would have sold for the equal of a few dollars. The painting of that same chair today would fetch in excess of 25 million. When you don't cover up the world with words and labels, a sense of the miraculous returns to your life that was lost a long time ago, when humanity, instead of using thought, became possessed by thought. A depth returns to your life. Things regain their newness, their freshness. And the great miracle is the experiencing of your essential self as prior to any words, thoughts, mental labels, and images. For this to happen, you need to disentangle your sense of I, of beingness, from all the things it has become mixed up within. That is to say, identified with. That disentanglement is what this book is about. The quicker you are in attaching verbal or mental labels to things, people, or situations, the more shallow and lifeless your reality becomes, and the more deadened you become to reality, the miracles of life that continuously unfolds within and around you. In this way, cleverness may be gained, but wisdom is lost, and so are joy, love, creativity, and aliveness. They are concealed in the still gap of between the perception and the interpretation. Of course, we have to use words and thoughts. They have their own beauty, but we need to become imprisoned in them, Words reduce reality to something the human mind can grasp, which isn't very much. Language consists of 5 basic sounds produced by the vocal cords. They are the vowels, A, E, I, O, U. The other sounds are consonants produced by air pressure, S, F, G, and so forth. Do you believe some combination of such basic sounds could ever explain who you are, or the ultimate purpose of the universe, or even what a tree or stone is in its depth? Okay, so let me stop there for a second, because I can agree with that, and I understand that. And I do think that we get too attached to labels, and then we base our experience in this world with the identification of that label. And I get that that could be a hindrance, but it can also be an aid, meaning if I am trying to experience something and the only way I can experience that thing is by associating or by engaging with either that activity, that genre, that group of people, that collection, then I'm using a title, I'm using a label to kind of acclimate myself to whatever. But I get it. I understand what they're going with this. But here's the thing. Like when I talk to spirit, when I communicate with spirit, because our language is complex in comparison to our understanding of our telepathic or mind-to-mind communication. When I communicate with them mentally, there's a lot more that can come through. However, because we are in this physical reality, because we are very much physical beings in this space having a human experience as it should be, they have to adjust their communication. They have to adapt their communication so that we can understand them. Usually when a spirit communicates with me, they are not going off in my mind and saying, "Hi, my name is Sarah. I was 27 when I died. I died in a car accident, and I also love poetry. And one of my favorite poems of all time was this poem written by this artist." And so I spend most of my... That doesn't happen. They don't come through, communicate that way. It might happen in some instances and in some unique cases, but most spirits and most mediums that I know do not talk to spirits this way, because if not, everything out of their mouth would be 100% correct, and it would need to be as verbatim. When I communicate with the spirits, what they have to do is, because what I have experienced in this reality is different from what someone else has experienced in this reality, there has to be a collaboration happening within the mind for the communication to take place. So let's say, for example, when I bring this up and I hold this up, this is a remote, right? I think of this as a remote. And so the first thing that I think of when I think of a remote is I think of the remote always getting stuck in the middle of the cushions when I'm having dinner at night and watching TV, because that's where it usually ends up. And I want the buttons to not be pressed, or for them not to trigger the TV to get off of Netflix or whatever I'm watching. But someone else who may have who may have had a different experience for a remote. Let's say my partner's mother, she worked for Texas Instruments, which is a company that made chips. What if someone worked at a remote factory or at a factory where they made chips for remotes, and when they see this, immediately they associate this with a career or a job or with an expertise. And so it can be understood in two very different ways. And so even though we may have the same label, remote, the experience or what is represented by that thing, that symbol, that sign, is unique unto the person that had the experience. So what happens is when I communicate with spirit, the spirit has to dumb down, in essence, the energy of the label, meaning that they're gonna use whatever's in my being. So they're gonna use my thoughts, my emotions, and my memories. That's how they communicate. And in order for me to understand where they're going with something or what they're trying to say, they have to dumb it down for me, because I'm in a physical body. I still associate and relate so much to the physical reality that I cannot comprehend or understand the enormity of their experience. Even though they may try to trigger a feeling or an emotional sense within me, it's only so much they can communicate through the way that they are able to communicate, which is they trigger a thought, an emotion, or a memory within my being. I'm aware of it, and then I have to figure out what it means. Sometimes they have to put two or three together. Sometimes the one thing is fine on its own, and then they'll grasp it or they'll understand it. So they have to dumb down the message. And then they have to find something in my mind that represents that. So I may be going along doing a reading for someone and keep thinking of the remote. And I'm like, I keep thinking of like when I keep having my remote. And so what I may say to them is like, okay, like they're showing me a remote. So I'm thinking that either you may have had some issues with the remote, you found it in a weird place, or it did something weird. And then not knowing or realizing that they're dumbing down the message. And they're actually just trying to say that they worked at a remote factory or they worked making chips for remotes. And I'm over here thinking it's a completely different thing, just because our minds are not perfectly merged. And unless I'm going to assume the full essence of that person's body, which is really hard to do in this physical form, then it's not going to translate over as well. So there has to be a dumbing down of the information. And so all of us in human form, when we connect with each other and relate to each other, yes, we have an interconnectedness that's there, that is subtle, that is not based in words or not based in traditional language. There's experiences we've all had that we can relate to, but we use labels, we use words, we use limiting ideas to help each other understand some of those basic elements and components. And so that's why I'm like, I get the fact that we shouldn't label this and should, but at the same time, we're in physical form. Like, unless we're floating around as clouds, perfectly merging to each other, ain't gonna happen. We ain't gonna perfectly understand each other. So we're still gonna need language. We're still gonna need a form of communication. Yeah, if we all work on being sensitive enough and open enough to understand another human being just by being in their presence or by feeling their energy, then yeah, we definitely will get better at understanding each other without the use of labels. But I mean, it's, okay, are you going to get everybody on board with that? Because I don't think you're going to get everybody on board with that. So that was my tangent. So. The illusory self. The word I embodies the great error and the deepest truth depending on how it is used. In conventional usage, it is not only one of the most frequently used words in the language today with the related words me, my, mine, and myself, but also one of the most misleading. In normal everyday usage, I embodies the primordial error, a misperception of who you are, an illusory sense of identity. This is the ego. This illusory sense of self is what Albert Einstein, who had deep insights not only into the reality of space and time, but also into human nature, referred to as an optical illusion of consciousness. That illusory self then becomes the basis for all further interpretations, or rather misinterpretations of reality. All thought processes, interactions, and relationships, all thought processes, interactions, and relationships. Your reality becomes a reflection of the original illusion. The good news is, if you can recognize illusion as illusion, it dissolves. The recognition of illusion is also its ending. Its survival depends on your mistaking it for reality. In the seeing of who you are not, the reality of who you are emerges by itself. This is what happens as you slowly and carefully read this and the next chapter, which are about the mechanics of the false self we call the ego. So, what is the nature of this illusory self? What you usually refer to when you say I is not who you are. By a monstrous act of reductionism, the infinite depth of who you are is confused with a sound produced by the vocal cords or the thought of I in your mind and whatever the I has identified with. So what do the usual I and the related me, my, or mine refer to? When a young child learns that a sequence of sounds produced by the parents' vocal cords is his or her name, the child begins to equate a word, which in the mind becomes a thought, with who he or she is. At that stage, some children refer to themselves in the third person. Johnny is hungry. Soon after, they learn the magic word, I, and equate it with their name, which they have already equated with who they are. Then other thoughts come and merge with the original I thought. The next step are thoughts of me and mine to designate things that are somehow part of I. This is identification with objects, which means investing things. Investing things. But ultimately, thoughts that represent things with a sense of self, thereby deriving an identity from them. When my toy breaks or is taken away, intense suffering arises. Not because of any intrinsic value that the toy has, the child will soon lose interest in it, and it will be replaced by other toys, other objects. But because of the thought of mine, the toy became part of the child's developing sense of self, of I. And so, as the child grows up, the original I thought attracts other thoughts to itself. It becomes identified with a gender, possessions, the sense perceived body, a nationality, race, religion, profession. Other things the I identifies with are roles, mother, father, husband, wife, and so on. Accumulated knowledge or opinions, likes and dislikes, and also things that happened to me in the past, the memory of which are thoughts that further define my sense of self as me and my story. These are only some of the things people derive their sense of identity from. They are ultimately no more than thoughts held together precariously by the fact that they are all invested with a sense of self. This mental construct is what you normally refer to when you say I. To be more precise, most of the time it is not who speaks when you say or think I, but some aspect of that mental construct, the egoic self. Once you awaken, you still use the word I, but it will come from a much deeper place within yourself. Most people are still completely identified with the incessant stream of mind, of compulsive thinking, most of it repetitive and pointless. There is no I apart from their thought process and the emotions that go with them. This is the meaning of being spiritually unconscious. When told that there is a voice in their head that never stops speaking, they say, "What voice?" or angrily deny it, which of course is the voice, is the thinker, is the unobserved mind. It could almost be looked upon as an entity that has taken possession of them. Some people never forget the first time they disidentified from their thoughts and thus briefly experienced the shift in identity from being the content of their mind to being the awareness in the background. For others, it happens in such a subtle way they hardly notice it. Or they just notice an influx of joy or inner peace without knowing the reason. The voice in the head. The first glimpse of awareness came to me when I was a first-year student at the University of London. I would take the tube subway twice a week to go to the university library, usually around 9 o'clock in the morning toward the end of the rush hour. One time, a woman in her early 30s sat opposite me. I had seen her before a few times on that train. One could not help but notice her. Although the train was full, the seats on either side of her were unoccupied. The reason being, no doubt, that she appeared to be quite insane. She looked extremely tense and talked to herself incessantly in a loud and angry voice. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she was totally unaware, it seemed, of other people, of her surroundings. Her head was facing downward and slightly to the left, and if she were addressing someone sitting in the empty seat next to her. Although I don't remember the precise content, her monologue went something like this. And then she said to me, so I said to her, "You are a liar. How dare you accuse me of, when you are the one who has always taken advantage of me? I trusted you and you betrayed my trust." There was the angry tone in her voice of someone who has been wronged, who needs to defend her position lest she become annihilated. As the train approached Tottenham Court Road Station, she stood up and walked toward the door with still no break in the stream of words coming out of her mouth. "That is my stop too," so I got off behind her. At street level, she began to walk toward Bedford Square, still engaged in her imaginary dialogue, still angrily accusing and asserting her position. My curiosity aroused, I decided to follow her as long as she was walking in the same general direction I had to go in. Although engrossed in her imaginary dialogue, she seemed to know where she was going. Soon we were within sight of the imposing structure of Senate House, a 1930s high-rise, the university's central administrative building and library. I was shocked. Was it possible that we were going to the same place? Yes, that's where she was heading. She was was she a teacher, a student, an office worker, a librarian? Maybe she was some psychologist research project. I never knew the answer. I walked 20 steps behind her, and by the time I entered the building, which ironically was the location of the headquarters of the Mind Police in the film version of George Orwell's novel 1984, she had already been swallowed up by one of the elevators. I was somewhat taken back by what I had just witnessed. A mature first-year student at 25. I saw myself as an intellectual in the making, and I was convinced that all of the answers to the dilemma of human existence could be found through the intellect. That is to say, by thinking. I didn't realize yet that thinking without awareness is the main dilemma of human existence. I looked upon the professors as sages, who had all the answers, and upon the university as the temple of knowledge. How could an insane person like her be part of this? I was still thinking about her when I was in the men's room prior to entering the library. As I was washing my hands, I thought, I hope I don't end up like her. The man next to me looked briefly in my direction, and I suddenly was shocked when I realized that I hadn't just thought those words, but mumbled them out loud. Oh my God, I'm already like her, I thought. Wasn't my mind as incessantly active as hers? There were only minor differences between us. The predominant underlying emotion behind her thinking seemed to be anger. In my case, it was mostly, I'm like super itchy, like in my nose. I'm like, what's going on? Give me a second. Okay, going back to this. The predominant underlying emotion behind her thinking seemed to be anger. In my case, it was mostly anxiety. She thought out loud. I thought mostly in my head. If she was mad, then everyone was mad, including myself. There were differences in degree only. For a moment, I was able to stand back from my own mind and see it from a deeper perspective. As it were, there was a brief shift from thinking to awareness. I was still in the men's room, but alone now, looking at my face in the mirror. At that moment of detachment from my mind, I laughed out loud. It may have sounded insane, but it was the laughter of sanity, the laughter of the big-bellied Buddha. Life isn't as serious as my mind makes it out to be. That's what the laughter seemed to be saying. But it was only a glimpse, very quickly to be forgotten. I would spend the next 3 years in anxiety and depression, completely identified with my mind. I had to get close to suicide before awareness returned, and then it was much more than a glimpse. I became free of compulsive thinking and of the false mind-made I. The above incident not only gave me a first glimpse of awareness, it also planted the first doubt as to the absolute validity of the human intellect. A few months later, something tragic happened that made my doubt grow. On a Monday morning, we arrived for a lecture to be given by a professor whose mind I admired greatly, only to be told that sadly he had committed suicide sometime during the weekend by shooting himself. I was stunned. He was a highly respected teacher and seemed to have all the answers. However, I could as yet see no alternative to the cultivation of thought. I didn't realize yet that thinking is only a tiny aspect of the consciousness that we are. Nor did I know anything about the ego, let alone being able to detect it within myself. So I'm going to stop there because it's a good stopping place. Okay, so he's talking about the I and like how we attach ourselves too much to the feeling of I, and also the idea that we attach ourselves or we're very much connected to our thoughts, and some people are, they think out loud or they're expressing themselves in that way. It's more of an egoic expression or form of expression. So, and I get it. I totally understand that. And the thing about it is my war is not with the ego. And just by default, like if you go through the process of, it's like money. People talk about money if it's the worst thing in the world. Money is a resource. It's a tool. It's something you can use to do some amazing things in this planet. It's also a weapon. People can use it against others as well. So the ego is very similar. The ego is a tool, and we can use it to our advantage, which means if we are identifying with a sense of I, what does that mean? And in my life, I have identified with a lot of different experiences and situations and assumed that as being a part of me, and I accept that. And I accept that because there's reasons I'm doing that. There's reasons why I'm here. I'm not here to avoid or ignore my identification or attachment to this reality. I'm here to experience this reality, to gain from it what it has to offer me. And it is going to require me to be connected and attached to certain things, whether they be things, experiences, people, whether they be labels. The reason why I'm able to speak on and to have as much compassion as I have is because of my experiences as being a gay man in this world. And so that attachment helps me to get a message across, even for those who cannot relate to it. If I just said, when I was younger, I had an experience and a human being was mean to me, and I don't want you to go through that. You're not going to relate to me. You're not going to know what the hell I'm talking about, because I'm sure you've had people be mean to you as well, but that's not really going to help you to dig into that depth of beingness, that depth of understanding, and the depth of the experience that you can use to an advantage. But when I tell you a story about my past as a gay man, a lot of you can identify with aspects of that. Even if it's not the entire thing, there are elements that a lot of people can identify with. And so in doing so, it raises that understanding within you. It brings up the opportunity to either have an idea and thought about that, to have a perspective on it, and to even witness or be open to the exchange of energy that I'm offering you. And by sharing my experience and by offering that emotional expression in the way that I express myself, the way that I put that out, there's an opportunity for you to receive that emotion back, to receive that experience back in some way. And there's a sharing going on. If I didn't have an attachment to that aspect of my experience in this physical world, at that part of my life, then I can't use it. And so everything that I have gone through and everything that I've quote unquote been attached to and identified with in my past and in this lifetime has served a purpose in helping and assisting others. And so if I just immediately focus on just only being detached and not fixating or not utilizing the I that I've that I've related to in all of that, then I can't really use it, because at that point it generalizes the experience, and most people don't connect with generalized experience. They connect with a experience they can personally identify with. That is a strategy actually that a lot of people do. They use experiences, they use your heartstrings, they pull at your heartstrings by helping you to identify with something. And if you're seeing a human being or something suffer, then you're going to identify with that. And then at that point, you are going to feel the need to raise up the level of compassion within you, to raise up the ability to have love or to have a more understanding heart because of it. But if you don't relate to something, you can't do anything to shift that here. And we don't live on a planet where a majority of the population is going to suddenly become awakened and it's going to operate from the perspective of non-labels. Now, we do have a shift happening in our society and in our world where people are starting to shift the pronouns, and they're starting to associate themselves with more expanded ideas. And I'm on board with all of that. I'm fine with that. However, if I really want to associate with this thing, that there's something in it for me. There's something there beyond just what I can comprehend on a conscious level. The problem, and what the book is about that's trying to help us understand, is when we over-identify, when we over-associate with certain things, when we over-associate with a specific party, for example, political party, when we over-associate or over-attach ourselves to a religious organization, when we overly attach ourselves to a person, when we overly attach ourselves to a lifestyle or a set of experiences that we are very comfortable in. It's when we get into that place where we can run into some issues. And at that point, that can becomes the only thing you identify with, and you close your walls, you close yourself off to the experience and the opportunity to have more through understanding, through engagement, through just love and compassion. You close yourself off to more when you only identify with certain groups and certain types of things. So that's what is understood when we over-identify with the I this, I that. No, we. And I try to talk about, like when I give advice on Dear Ferny, I use my experience to help you relate to what I've been through, because you may have gone through something similar, so you can understand what that would bring up within me. But then I acknowledge it as if we all need to learn this lesson. We all need to go through this experience. We all need to gain from that. What I've just gone through, we can all gain from it. And so that's where you kind of shift the trajectory of that. All right, so let me go through here because I want to see what you guys are saying here. Cassie's like, people who aren't New Age read this book. It is a great eye-opener. It is definitely an eye-opener. Yeah, it can definitely help you to understand. And it's a shift in perspective. All it is a shift in perspective. The best way to tap into the power of the universe is by shifting your perspective. And most people don't realize it's that easy. It is that easy to align and to connect with Source, is by shifting your perspective and who you are in this reality. It's all it takes. And then you unlock that ability or that mechanism, and then you can tap into it as well. Oh my God, yeah. Like Cassidy's like, wouldn't it be awesome if spirit could always come through speaking in full sentences? Absolutely. And that's probably where some people run into some issues, that they struggle with that. Because people watch shows, like if you ever watched like the show, like Jennifer Love Hewitt's show, what is it, Ghost Whisperer? Like, no, there's just no way that's the way it happens, because I've never met a medium and never seen a medium have that level of accuracy in what is being shared by a spirit, where it's like perfect sentences and they can talk exactly in that way. No, we can get close to embracing and embodying the energy and the information, but to be able to repeat verbatim is just not going to happen. Not in this lifetime, not in this form. Now, it may come through in dreams, but we're not really attached to our physical experience at that point, because dreams are an opportunity for us to disengage with the physical reality and to expand into an altered form of being. It's not a pure form of being, because it's still altered. It's not like the other side, but there are times when we can connect on that level and receive more information, receive more guidance. Terry's like, I love the glasses. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's for, these are the lenses that protect against that, like the light. so I don't get all that like light in my eyes and such. Yeah, Beba's like, you have mentioned before that our spirit guides are usually not our loved ones who have passed, and I understand that, but where in what dimension are our loved ones who are still around us? So that is a very complex answer, because it isn't as clear as you would hope, and it depends on your perspective. If you have the perspective that we are physical forms, that we embody a physicality, then the only idea of the other side is going to have to take on the same mechanisms of the physical forms, which is a world or a planet that's like this. There's gates, there's actual food people eat. It takes on a physicality. And so you limit how you can understand what their experience is in that state by the established identity of this reality. When I connect with the spirit, we exist in very multifaceted ways, and the highest form of it is energy. Whenever I've seen a spirit, and it's the purest version of that spirit, I don't see a personality, I don't see attire or style, I don't hear like a type of voice or accent. When I see the purest form of a spirit, it's just a little spot of light. It's just a little like orb of light, and it's a spot of light. They used to call them sprites in some like belief system, but there's this little like pinpoint of light, and it's like super small, and it's just this light, bright light. That's what it is in its purest form. But when I've seen an actual spirit or a ghost, I have seen it as an actual physical thing, like my hand, and so it can get very confusing. When I connect with them, there's levels to us that exist in every spectrum. I'm not just here and not there. I'm here and there. But this is the version of me that I am currently engaged with. And so when I'm no longer engaged with this version of myself, I'm no longer going to associate with this body, with this hands, with the struggles of this physical form, with the realities of this life. I'm no longer going to associate with that. And as I release that, it's almost like when you come home from a busy day wearing tight clothes and you just want to take everything off. That's what it feels like when we ascend into that state. And we release our physicality like clothes that are too tight, and then we expand like, I can breathe. But it's not like a emotional experience. It's more of an energetic and awareness experience. And so at that point, in that the only thing I can say is space or place, because it isn't even a physical place. In that state, we essentially have a lot of access and ability and understanding and awareness that we didn't have before. And so our experience is very different, and we understand a lot about ourselves in this form historically, and why we were involved in some of the experiences here, why we did certain things, why we didn't do some things. We're aware of all these things. It's very clear for us. And so when I talk about guides and when I talk about spirit guides, there are energies or I won't say personalities. Yeah, you can say personalities. There are identities, micro versions of God that have a persona we can relate to, that is best suited to help us understand what we've just done here and why we're here and what we're going to do coming in again. So those perspectives help us to understand ourselves. It's almost like us talking to God, but in a very micro dose so that we can take it. Because if God is the sun and you're like standing in front of the sun, you're going to go blind, right? Because you can't handle it. It's too big. It's too immense. It's too much. We can't embody that. But we can embody an aspect of it. And so guides are versions of that. But guides are also like us, and we are like guides. We are also similar in nature to that. So that's what a spirit guide is. And you can say they have personalities, they have names, because there are things that we use to identify. We have to use a form of identification with these. If we were all one and completely experiencing simultaneously in the way where we're always connected, then there would never be separation. There would have never been the separation, the reason why we came down here. The reason why we came down here is to separate ourselves from the understanding that we are God, and to make ourselves small and tiny and micro, and then have a unique experience that affords us. If we try to do that in reverse, we just reclaim our godliness, and there's no difference. There's nothing that separates any of us. But we don't know ourselves, because the reason why we are able to know ourselves as God and in form is through form. So that all of that comes into play there. So it isn't a physical place. However, when I've talked to spirits, what they do is, if I'm trying to connect to a spirit, what I'm connecting to in actuality is I'm connecting to the version of the spirit, a version of that soul that existed in this physical form and that people related to. But that being exists in a much more expanded way. And so when they give us information and talk about, like, I finally was able to eat and to enjoy my favorite food, it's their way of acknowledging this sense of, oh my God, like, it's like this expanded beingness. But that's something I can relate to. I can't relate to this expanded beingness because in this form, it's hard to do that. And so I can't relate to that. But they're going to communicate with me in a way that I can relate, which is why they talk this way to me. They communicate that way and share those ideas with me, because they're helping us to understand what it could be like, or what it has been like for them in some way, shape, or form. When I talk about angels, angels are like, pure forms of energy represented by wings, which it's a very basic symbol, and it's not a symbol that is based in Christianity. The symbol has been there. That visual has been there even way before Christianity existed. It's a representation, but the idea of the human being elevated, or the human sense of identity or consciousness or form elevated, and that's what an angel is. An angel is an elevated form of human love. It's what the wings represent. They represent the ability to soar, to be higher, to be above. That's all it represents. And so when we think of an angel, people always want to say, oh, well, my angel's Michael, my angel's this, my angel's that. I'm like, well, you can think of angels as personalities and people. They're not. There's not this like temple on the other side where all the angels are lined up and they're all like, making sure that they clock in and clock out in time. Like, there's nothing like that. But for a person who can only conceptualize that kind of reality, because the idea of being just like featureless and shapeless beings of awareness, they can't understand what that would even look like. And so they're not going to be able to conceive anything beyond what they only can relate to. And so that's what I mean when I talk about some of that in this way. So it isn't a place or a space. It is a representation of being and a state of being. But when we talk to them, or when I talk to them, they're going to help me relate to them, to help the person I'm talking to relate to the situation that they're going through. Yeah, I'm the same way with my grandmother. I have an incredible connection to my grandmother, even though I never met my grandmother. Her name was Irene, and I named my middle sister Irene after my grandmother, even though I'd never met her. But I feel this connection to my grandmother, and I've always felt this bond with her. And there's a story when I was younger, and I was a baby in my crib. My mom was in the kitchen doing some chores or cooking or something, and she heard me laughing and giggling by myself. And they always thought, and by the way, my grandmother, they always thought of her as an angel here. Like, they thought of her as like an angelic person, because she was never ill-mannered towards anyone. She was very kind and compassionate and loving. She was very much a docile personality. And also, even the people who would speak about her or speak ill about her, she wouldn't respond back or speak ill to them in response. So she was basically like a nun in essence, but she was still married with my grandfather, etc. But they talk about her this way, and I loved her. But my mom was cooking in the kitchen, and she heard me giggling, and then she came into the room to see what I was laughing at, and her mother, my grandmother, was standing there next to my crib. She was wearing the pink dress that they buried her in. She said she looked just like a real apparition, except there was a light around her. She was bathed in light, and she was looking at me, and I was looking at her, and I was laughing, and she was so happy to see me, and she told my mother to take care of me and make sure that I was safe. And that was it. And then she just evaporated and disappeared in that moment. And that's one of the memories that I have of my grandmother. But I don't remember that because I was a kid. But my mom remembers that. And so we carry these connections with our loved ones in spirit in that way. The name of the book is A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. Let's see. Thank you, author. Let's see. Oh, I've watched Felt Like You Can't Force Yourself Out of Attachment. No, you can't. For me, like, I choose what I am very intentional about my attachments. And that has actually been an incredible, like, shift in the way that I operate in this world, because I know I'm here to go through unique experiences that this reality affords me. I know that on a higher level, there's a much bigger game plan at work, even if I don't always understand every aspect of it in this form, because I'm so attached to, like, moment experiences, etc. We all are. But I'm very intentional with how I attach myself to this reality. And so there are certain things in this reality that I'm very attached to, like my mama cat, like my partner, like some people in some spaces, like New Mexico. I'm very attached to New Mexico. Then there are certain things I have, like, not much attachment to at all, and I allow myself to not feel any attachment, even if it's something I should feel guilty about, like my mom. I love my mom, but I don't feel a sense of attachment to my mother. And so that's one person. There are other people in the family I don't feel as much of an attachment to, and it's just the way it is, and that's okay. I don't have to be so attached to everything. So I'm very intentional with what I choose to be attached to and what I'm not attached to. And what I am attached to, I use it to my advantage. I use it to what I'm trying to do in this world, what I believe my mission or my goal is here in the soul level. Aw, thank you, Steph. She's like, I could watch and listen to you all day. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate that. It's funny because after I get done with these, like, lives and stuff, I start going through my analytical mind and I start thinking back to what I said. Did I speak the way I was supposed to? Did I share something the proper way? What was I doing? And I get stuck in my head. And so I have to tell myself, stop it. Like, it's done. You did the best you could. You can, if you need to do something different next time, you can do it better next time. But just, you put out what you need to put out. But thank you. I appreciate that affirmation for my work. Yes, Cassidy's like, there's so much we can find in others that we can relate to if we take the time to listen. Yeah, I think that one of the struggles and one of the biggest things that we are all really struggling through right now is the dehumanization of people, meaning that we've forgotten, and that's where I think we're running into an ego overdrive, where we've become so connected and so attached to an idea or a political organization or a religious organization or this or that we only allow ourselves to function or to operate as a human through that lens. And we don't give ourselves a chance to really expand beyond just that lens, just that idea or those beliefs. And because of this, it forces us, or it causes us to feel like we have to protect ourselves from the things that we are not attached to. And so if we are so attached to one thing, but we have no attachment to something else, we can't even relate to it, then at that point, that is expendable. That is something that has no meaning and no value and no worth. And unfortunately, in our society today and in our civilization, this is happening with people around the planet, where groups or belief systems or religious organizations or there's the dehumanization of people. And so there's a demonization that ends up happening because of the dehumanization. When you dehumanize an individual and a human being, even some of the people who've done the worst in this world, when you dehumanize others, you also demonize them in the process. And unfortunately, all that people need is a target to shoot at. And that's what they end up doing, because they feel that that is costing them something. That person existing, that idea existing, that existing or being is costing them something. And then there's this incessant need to destroy or to disrupt or to do away with anything other than what I'm believing or choosing to identify with. And so here's an example of this. And so actually I'll give you two examples. Like when you think of Canada right now and all of the children whose bodies they are finding next to these churches and these places that were designed and set up to take these people out of their native culture, take them out of their native territories and group them into a idea that they all fall within this category. They are all part of this same idea or ideology or whatever. And then to say that that is an offense against what we all believe. So we're going to dehumanize, and in the process of dehumanizing, we demonize. And in the process of demonizing, we automatically make it acceptable to act in our shadow being, to be our shadow selves, to embody that Satan within all of us that exists, that is a part of our core human nature. And so we end up justifying our behavior and our furtherance of the detachment of creation, the detachment of God and source. Every one of those childs was a witness of God, was a child of God, was God. And in the moment you act against someone in that way, you immediately detach yourself from source and from creation, from all others. And that's the problem, is we're so used to that now. We're so used to immediately disconnecting and immediately disassociating, and that we by default go into a dehumanization mode and also to a demonization mode. And I'm not one to speak on this and say that I'm above it, because I'm not. I've made that mistake plenty of times myself, and it's something that I continue to push through and work through. Here's another example of this, and let's get it political, because this is a perfect example of this. Though in this last election period, I may have embodied, or I may have related to or identified with a specific party or a specific grouping of people, that doesn't mean that I want to destroy, or I want to hurt, or I want to cause suffering for everybody that I don't agree with. That doesn't mean that at all. I'm just trying, I just want to make sure that I am keeping myself safe, and that I'm making it so that it is not possible for anyone under a premise or an idea or a theory or belief system to also hurt others as well. And that's where I come from and all of that. So for me, when you see me side with certain things, it's not because I think that I'm 100% right, or because I know everything, because I don't know everything. But when I understand that when you allow certain perspectives and beliefs and ideologies to be acceptable and to be okay when they flat out go against being human, being compassionate, and considering other people, at that point I'm on the opposite camp there. I'm on the opposite end of it, because I'm like, no, this is not something that I support in my daily living, in my daily life. I won't support it on a national stage, in a national way, or through a group or collection of people. At the same time, just because I align myself with a category of perspective, with a grouping of minds, doesn't mean that I agree with all of that either. So like right now, there are things that I'm still not satisfied with, and I still think need to change from the people that I aligned with. So I'm like, no, like, just because you get my vote doesn't mean that you get my unending approval or acceptance in anything that you do. I just gave you some power. You don't get to just run rampant with that power. So you need to, there are certain expectations and ideas that I still hold very tightly to, and I expect that regardless of party or policy. So in my mind, I don't care who I voted for. I still expect a level of humanity to come from this. I still expect ideas and things to be promoted that can benefit all people involved, and not just a select group. And so that's always been my perspective, and I don't care who's running for what. I'm always going to align with any posturing that supports more of that, maybe not perfectly, but more of that than the opposite. And so that's where I take it. And so I have to identify the reason why I can be compassionate, and the reason why I feel protective of humans in general is because I identify with being human. I identify with the experience of being human. I identify with going through a life where you have to bust your ass for pennies on the dollar. I identify with coming from a place of being poor and having the assistance that helped us to survive. I identify with all of these realities and human experiences. Because of this, I have a nature that takes all of that into account and sees people who by default can usually be demonized and can be dehumanized. So just because you don't have a license in the United States, just because you don't speak a specific language, just because you are of a different color or you're of a different background, doesn't mean you don't feel pain or suffer, or you're going to cry out when you've lost. It doesn't mean any of those things. And I'm not going to act like it does. And so no, like you have to understand, it doesn't matter what is what, you can't place yourself in this ideal category of I'm the only human that matters, nobody else does. So, and then you end up with situations like the Titanic where, more than half the people sank and went down with the ship and died. And even then, like, it was kind of designed and set up that way. Well, the better half of the ship is going to survive. Well, not even half really made it through. So, of course, yeah. I mean, unity yoga. It's like we just have to remember that we are all spirit, perhaps just expressions of spirit. We are all expressions of God, and spirit is a label. I got you there with the label, girl. But label. So spirit is a label. Soul is a label. God is a label. But we use labels to help ourselves understand and grasp ideas and concepts and so forth, because it's harder to do so without words, without language. Language, words, art has been created. It's actually one of the geniuses of being human, because we don't have animals that create art or produce literature. We don't have forms of expressions that come from other forms of being. Some animals, not all, but some animals can do so. But we have a unique ability to express idea in a type of form, whether it's through art, through language, through music, and that's the genius of humanity. That's a part of being human. That's something that we get to own and that we should really appreciate in this form. When we're not in this form, the uniqueness kind of evolves into a collective being, and that uniqueness, that specificity to you as an I is what makes the genius work. Abe is like, yes, Cassidy, one of my favorite quotes, I don't like that man, I should get to know him better, Abe Lincoln. Yeah, I mean, I agree. In an ideal world, we should listen to each other. In an ideal world, we should be aware of each other, we should care for each other, we should all feel connected as a human family. In an ideal world. We do not live in an ideal world, and this reality will not allow for that kind of an ideal scenario to come about in the near future. It's possible, but it ain't coming yet. It's not here yet, but it's in the process. It's always been in the process, because everything goes in a circular pattern, and everything, we did so much to separate ourselves from God only to return back. It's almost like a cyclical pattern. And that's not me being cynical, it's me being realistic, because I am not going to go against the grain of what has designed in a unique way by sourcing by God in all of us, in agreement to it. I'm going to work with it and do the best that I can with it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to try to change the entirety of reality just because I believe that we should all be like formless, shapeless, bonded mass in consciousness. That's not why we're here. It's not why we exist in this form. But yeah, we should listen to each other. We should know each other. And I think in my life, I've always been the devil's advocate, meaning that if I don't agree with someone or I'm trying to understand a different mindset or perspective, I usually put myself in that person's mental space or that place to try to grasp it, to try to understand it. Even last year, when I was struggling with a lot of different ideas and perspectives, I was asking people explain this to me or help me understand this, because I don't want to feel like I'm just being one-sided in everything that I'm putting out there, and that I'm completely and I'm coming from a place that is not consistent and not within integrity. So I need to understand some of this. And time again, I ran into situations where people were out of integrity. What they were saying, what they believed, and what they were doing were two different things, and it wasn't matching up. So I'm like, okay, then what are you doing? What are you doing? So we live in a reality where there is a physical effect on people's bodies that is spreading across the globe. People are dying, people are getting sick, people are suffering. To dismiss or to ignore or to say that it is never happened or it's not real is ignorance in the moment, because there's enough evidence and enough people going through the experience to validate it. And so if this is a real experience that humans are having, what can we do to reduce the suffering? If we can't end this or make this disappear, what can we do to end the suffering? And so my position has always been, what can I do to end the suffering? What can I do to to reduce it in any way, shape, or form until we can end it if it's possible. And that has always been my course of action. And some people might say, well, this is a natural virus and people should just get it, and then whoever lives, whoever dies. I'm like, yeah, well, why, have you ever stopped to think maybe that when certain generations or certain races of beings like humans exist up to a certain point, at some point in a lot of different planetary systems, the species that is dominant on that planet becomes in conflict with the planetary system itself. And so there's a mechanism that happens where the planetary system begins to slap back and lash out and starts to create a mechanism of evolution for that species. If you continue, I will die as a planet. And if I put you in a situation where you have to adapt and change so that we can work together and live together, then that is an evolutionary step in the right direction to self-sustain, for both. And so what if the idea of, okay, this is the situation, this is the reality we're dealing with on this planet, what do we need to do to survive this? Well, we shouldn't try to survive. We should just let whoever's going to live, and whoever's going to die. And our systems, our bodies will adapt. Okay, but we also have an intellect. We also have a mind. And that intellect and that perspective, that unique form of existing has afforded us the opportunity to create sciences, to create a form of expression, a form of understanding this reality in this universe. And that affords us opportunities to utilize what's at our disposal and to go with it and to use it to our advantage. But when we are in a situation where we are conflicted with the planet and we're also conflicted amongst ourselves, then we just have to be practical and use what's at our advantage. And so we have an advantage in science, not a perfect one, but an advantage nonetheless. Lots of people died trying to fly a plane for the first time, and now people use it without question, and it's one of the safest ways to travel. And so it's not something that people struggle with now because it's a norm, and we've gotten better and evolved to strengthen the security of that. So the new sciences, the new things that we've formed or created, they're not perfect, and there's definitely issues. However, we shouldn't say, well, no, we should just exist as pure people, live off of the land, I'm going to eat some tree bark, and we will survive this, and we can have a glorified, unified world. Like, what kind of reality are you living in? Because that has never happened for the last 2,000 plus years. So for you to think that we should suddenly just start operating that way because you have a delusionary state of being, because you're not facing the reality of this physical world, okay, good luck with that. And I've met people who believe that we should, instead of creating vaccines, instead of focusing on that, instead of trying to control this virus, we should all eat completely green. We should all eat completely pure. We should all have a positive thought, and this is going to be amazing. And I'm like, okay, so you want to take mass amounts of people who for generations have operated a certain way, have used fossil fuels, have eaten horribly with fast food in the last few generations. You want to take this amount of people and try to force them to change overnight instead of just utilizing a tool to our advantage? Good luck with that. And so again, there's a reality shift. There's a reality perspective that you have to maintain in order to survive. And so this entire experience may be nature's way of giving our species an advantage. The advantage of accepting a reality that is beyond our control. This thing is beyond our control, but we can reduce its suffering on us and on this planet. And we have to use tools at our advantage that are imperfect. So there are opportunities for us to understand what is occurring, to understand what we are capable of in reacting to that, and then to choose to survive even if there is risk, because there is risk every way you look, every direction you look, there is a risk. And so do we move forward reducing the risk for ourselves as a collective people on the planet, or do we move forward thinking about ourselves as individual and just saying, well, if you didn't eat green and if you didn't do your smoothies and if you didn't buy these essential oils, then you deserve to die because you're choosing to not be healthy, and you're choosing the vaccine, and you're choosing to accept these corporate, greedy, and then they go into a whole different direction. And I'm like, look, this comes down to basic reality. It doesn't matter what's going on behind the scenes. Some of the most incredible inventions and incredible experiences that we've come through as humans were backed up by some shady things going on in the background. And so nothing is ideal, and humans are not ideal, and humans are not perfect. So we're dealing with an imperfect reality within an imperfect set of circumstances, and we have to make an imperfect decision. And if you are thinking that the decision you're making is perfect, then you're delusional, and you're not embracing the reality and the opportunity you're afforded in this physical form. That's just my perspective on that. And so for me, it's like, okay, how can I reduce the suffering? What can I do to reduce the suffering? And people don't understand that that is the premise of my positions. And I always try to take a position in an effort to reduce any form of suffering, even if people don't agree with the tactic. I get it. With the tactic, I mean, when you're in triage and people are being blown up next to you and you don't have the luxury of a hospital that's fully equipped that can take care of every nook and cranny or issue that your body is dealing with, you have to make decisions that are imperfect. And if you got an infected leg and your leg is just not going to be cured anytime soon, and you don't have those essential oils that are supposed to cure defective legs, then at that point you just need to accept the fact that maybe this leg is going to come off, and you have to live a life without a leg. That is surviving. That is surviving despite the circumstances. That is moving forward and choosing to survive, even if it's in an imperfect form. And so we are moving forward and we are shifting and changing. But this whole experience has afforded us and our civilization an opportunity. There's a book, when I think of all of this, I keep thinking back to a book by, it's called Past Lives, Future Living, I think, or Past Lives, Future Lives. And it's by, what is it? Who's by? What's his name? What's his name? The Past Life guy. Forgot his name. The Past Life guy. Anyways, I forgot his name. Anyways, he did, there was back when he used to do a lot of events, and he used to put a lot of the people who were at the events into hypnosis, a collective hypnosis. He would take them back into the past, and stuff would come up that they would write down right afterwards. He would also take these people, these groupings of people, into the future. And he would take them out 25 years, 50 years, 100 years. When he did this, I mean, it's in the book. I just forgot the name of the book. Past Lives, Future Healing, I think. Past Lives, Future Healing, I think that's what it's called. When he took people 25 years into the future, there was still a lack of consensus for what was going to happen in the future. And so there was a lot of different answers. When he took everybody 50 years into the future, all of the answers started to become much more aligned or similar in nature. When he took people 100 years into the future, they were pretty much all on the same page. So the closer we are to the moment right now, things are still being decided, things are still being done, things are still being handled, and we are choosing in the moment how we're going to progress forward. This is our choice. We have this decision period to go through. We are maturing as a species on this planet. We can either accept the fact that we live on a planet that is not disposable and understand our part in all of that and own it and then work with it, or we can simply exist as if nothing has to change. We can live the way we have, and there's unlimited resources. No, there are limited resources. This is the planet. This is reality. There is no unlimited on a planet. That we need to take care of this planet because we're killing it and we're going to destroy ourselves in the process. And so, in part of the book, and this thing has been popping up in my head over and over and over again in the last year, where like between 25 and 50 years into the future, there's a massive drop in the population on this planet. And different things were triggers. There were different issues that were happening. There was water wars, there was disease or pandemics, there was wars. So there was different things that took place that were a part of the amount of people who died on the planet, or the massive drop in population. I think it's a combination of many things, but I definitely feel like this pandemic and what it does to your body, how it affects your body going forward, your children's body. I believe that this has a fundamental impact on our systems. And so if we start hearing about a bunch of people, we're already hearing it from people who because of plastic. There's plastic in the atmosphere, there's plastic everywhere. Most of us have a little bit of plastic in our DNA now because it's basically we've done so much of it that now our bodies have been affected. And it may be a reason why there's a rising case of infertility amongst people. But I can just imagine if we have a lot of people who get a virus or get a condition that impacts the longevity of their life or their capacity to reproduce, if we have plastics in our system, if we reduce our resources and we find ourselves in water wars, all of that is going to contribute to a drop of population. And so it doesn't matter what's the cause of it. We just need to accept the fact that where we are now on this planet, we have a responsibility and an obligation to not only the planet, but to the survival of our race and our species. And we are in a position where we can actually make changes that will help us to survive. But I fundamentally believe that nature is not testing our physical body's strength to survive a virus. I believe that nature is now pushing our species into a unique dynamic of intelligence and self-awareness and cultural awareness, civilized awareness of self and of all others. And I feel like that's going to be a huge determining factor on what will move forward and what will be held back. And so I believe that's a part of this whole growth and ascension process that people are obsessed with. But that's just a belief that I have. And all these one-word lines keep popping into my mind, there's a huge population drop. Why is there a huge population drop? What's going to cause that? Well, hello, we've got plenty of ways that could be triggered now going forward. So oh, cool! I see. Oh, yeah, it's my outside view. It's like I get to see outside. One of the things I wanted to manifest. Thank you for that. Manifest in this world is I wanted to manifest having a desk where I sat in front of a window where I could see the view and see everything going out, and that's what I get. I get that amazing view of the mountains and going out because that allows me to expand my mind beyond the boundary of our physical form or a wall. So that's why I appreciate that. Okay, let's go here. I'm about to get off here because I'm gotta go walking. I gotta go do my walk. Hey, Six, go to my website. Everything's on my website. So go check out my website, fernandomaron.com. Everything you want to know is on there. Let's see. Thank you. I get it as much as my human brain can comprehend it. I used to wonder if I was holding him, my dad, from going to the next dimension or place where he's to be. So at times I'd feel. Now we connect with aspects of our loved ones, but we don't keep them from experiencing what they're meant to experience. We each individually have there's a plan in this form and in the larger form. There's plans, there's cycles, there's patterns, and those are going to go on regardless. Cassidy is like, oh, so that is the abuela energy I told you I see around you in class. Thank you, Irene. Yes, that is her. You're not the first, and interestingly enough, you're not the first person to see her or to sense her. My friend Shannon has sensed her as well. So they've sensed her around me as well. Oh, you're welcome, Sylvia. You're welcome. Yes and no. Steph. Yes, we tend to attach ourselves to the things we feel the most comfortable with, or the things that we can use as a manipulation tactic against the dangers we perceive in this world. So attachments can definitely be very, they can underhand our spiritual ability to be connected to source in this form. They can definitely do that, but they can also help you to identify with forms of love that you can understand. In, when you think of the other side, or you think of being in that state, think of it as like a featureless reality. There's no distinguishing of energy because it's not necessary. Here we have the ability to distinguish an energy, and we use our sight, our senses, and there's physical forms and things that we assign meaning and value to, or touch to. We assign meaning and understanding to, and so yeah, most of us tend to stay with what's comfortable because it's what we're comfortable with. But you sometimes have to push yourself outside that boundary to experience beyond what you've basically capped yourself off at. Meaning that if you limit what your potential, here, in other words, when I first realized that God did not only exist in the physical book of the Bible, and I realized that God exists in all things and in all forms, that was mind-blowing to me because I no longer limited my understanding and relationship to God to the book. I allowed myself to expand beyond that. And so in doing so, I experienced more love, more compassionate and acceptance, more understanding and awareness I could have ever wished for, because I did not keep God in a box. I did not keep myself in the box either. I allowed myself to expand out. Now, granted, you should always be aware and you should always be intentional, because when you just like open the door to anything and everything, you're not being intentional. You're just kind of expanding in all directions, and that also includes both positive and negative. But when you're intentional, you can create more of a breeze blowing you in a particular direction that is what you desire to understand, but you don't fully know yet. Yeah. All right, guys, I'm out of time because I got to get to getting. So I love you all. I will be back on Friday for our next City Group